Hey, it's Lando here. Just wanted to do this video about the loanership matrix. So I realized that even though, it says it's been updated 1 day ago, I'm not 100% sure that every ship is looked at when they do these updates. So CIG, this is a polite ask to please overhaul the ship loaners. Some of the ships listed are already in game but are still on the list, and others just don't make sense when you compare. I've read, everything here. I think another rule that would help is if everybody that's bought a ship that's more than $750, I think they should get 4 loaners until that ship is in game, because most of those ships are capital ships or extremely large ships. I mean, and I don't think it's too much of a stretch to give those people 4 ships, until their massive investment ship is in game. That doesn't mean you have to give them 4 carracks or anything crazy like that, but I do think they should have 4 loaners. That fit the type of gameplay that they can expect to have, or at least as much as you can for now until that ship comes in. For ships that come with vehicles, you should give the loaners for the vehicles as well. So let me give you an example. The 600i is supposed to come with a G12, right? All right. So it says here, what ships already contain a G12 series vehicle, and can that vehicle be upgraded to a G12R, G12A version? Then it says the Origin G12, previously referred to as the Origin Rover, is standard equipment on the Origin 600i Explorer. All existing 600i pledges have been converted to include the G12. Players with both a 600i Explorer and a standalone G12 would be able to upgrade the standalone G12 while keeping the original base vehicle from the 600i. All right, so if we go back here, we're getting a Cyclone, it looks like, to replace that G12 Rover. However, the Lynx is in game. For the G12 variants, it says a Lynx is the loaner. So why do we have a Cyclone instead of a Lynx? It just makes sense if you're going to give certain loaners for a vehicle that's already in a ship. Why wouldn't that ship also get those same loaners? I think that's just common sense for everybody. I think this would solve everybody's issues with loaners for the most part, outside of making sure that the ships are relevant. I think you have to always give equal or greater value with loaners. People invested in the game, there's no reason they should get less value than their pledge. The SRVs in game, so I'll use this one as an example, right? Like, look at the SRV had an Aurora LN, right? Let's go and find out how much an SRV costs. $150, right? And now let's look at Aurora LN. $40. Why are you giving somebody an Aurora LN, a $40 ship, to replace a $150 ship? Now, I'm using that as an example because that ship's already in game, so there's no loaner for it anymore. And I don't want to pick on any particular ship, but I just want to just point that out. Like, I don't think anybody who owns a $150 ship should not get $150 worth of ship loaner. Like this, there's no equivalent obviously for the SRV, because the SRV right now is the only ship that has that functionality. But you could at least give, an Aurora LN and another ship. I think you should. I think you should. There should be $110 ship or greater that you give to the SRV loaner so that it's equal. That just makes sense. You're giving them the same amount of ship that they purchased, or greater. If it's a larger investment. What we'll do now is we'll go down the ship loaner matrix, and then I'll give my opinions on what you should switch some of these to. So I'm assuming that some of these are going to change, but I see this as last updated December 15th, and it is currently December 16th. And the X1 is currently in game, which I believe the 400i comes with an X1. Because I know you all are going on Christmas break, so maybe this is something you'll fix right after. So no rush on this as far as right now. January is perfectly fine, even February. There's some things in here that are obviously that can change, right? So like I was saying with the 400i. Yeah, the X1 is deployed on a lift platform at the front of the 400i. Okay, so the 400i does come with an X1. The X1 was just released as of 3.22. So you updated it on December 15th when 3.22 was live, but you didn't just take the 400i off the list or put that the X1 was replacing the 325. So like I don't again, like no rush on that. I'm just pointing out these things, right? So let's go down our list. The 600i, I think you can replace the Cyclone with a Lynx, but I'm not 100% certain that a Lynx fits inside the 600i. So, if it does, I would say replace that Cyclone with a Lynx, and replace the 325A if you want to keep it a ship with a 315P. That makes more sense since it's an Explorer ship. The 325A is nice, but if I have the Explorer variant, I think I would prefer the 315P or even the 300i. I think fits more with the Explorer. And if this is really just a placeholder because you wanted to put an X1 in there, or something like that, then the X1 is out. So you could of course just put the X1 in there, and then that would solve that. Moving on, the 890 jump, I think the same changes as the 600i. You could do a 315p, a 300i. I think an X1 should come with that instead of the 85X, unless the 85X has a specific place to go in the 890 jump. But yeah, I think an X1 should come with. I think an 890 jump should have a bay for all of the vehicles, to be completely honest with you, like a bay for all of the Origin vehicles. I think that would be a really cool addition to the 890 jump. But an Apollo, okay, I think it's good with the Cutlass Red, but I would add a C8R Pisces because an Apollo is a higher tier than a Cutlass Red, so it should have more than a Cutlass Red, and you already have two medical ships in game. So why not add the C8R Pisces, you know, to make it show that this is more than just a Cutlass Red because you bought an Apollo. This is the one, the Arastra and the Orion are what really bothered me the most. So I'm gonna skip ahead here. I'll come back and go through the list correctly, but look at what the Arastra gets. It gets a Prospector, a Mole, and an Arrow. Okay. Now, if you scroll down to the Orion, it gets a Prospector and a Mole. No Arrow. So somebody has to explain that to me. The Arastra is the smaller minor ship, yet it gets an extra ship for a loner, and the Orion doesn't. This doesn't make any sense, CIG. This makes zero sense. At the very least, the Orion should have the same thing. But let's just fix it, right? We don't want to dwell on it. I think instead of the arrow, which I understand that, see, like it says here, due to the current restrictions in Arena Commander, certain ships have a secondary loaner to allow them to play in all game modes, an anvil arrow, right? Got it. That's why you added the arrow in here. I'm assuming you can solve that by just give everyone who owns one of the ships on the list an arrow in Arena Commander to ensure that everyone has access to all the game modes. You don't have to specifically say, okay, you get an arrow, you get an arrow, you don't. I think, it would just make sense to give everybody an arrow that has one of these ships that's on this list. It being a spaceship, not a vehicle. So for the Arastra, I think it should have a freelancer. It should be a prospector, a mole, and a freelancer. And take your pick of which freelancer, but I think, that would make more sense. It's a $500 ship. You already got the prospector and the mole. The arrow, I think, is a nice ship. I like the Arrow, but I just think the freelancer would make more sense. A lot of these are in game, so we'll go all the way to the Crucible here. A Constellation Andromeda is good, but I would add an MPUV or a Vulture, because I like the Constellation Andromeda is great, but this is a repair ship, and it's supposed to be the repair capital ship. I really think an MPUV or a Vulture would fill the void here. And I know, Vulture is salvage, but there's clearly going to be a link between salvage and repair. So I feel like if you're going to give a loaner for a ship that's in that link, why can't it be the other side of the link? So a Vulture makes sense to me. I think some of these you can keep the same. So I won't go over the ones that I think should keep the same. So basically, I'll only really mention the ones that need a replacement. So let's drop down here to the Endeavor. All right. I'm not sure why I get a Starfarer for the Endeavor. There's no part of the Endeavor that can do anything with refueling. So I don't really understand that. I feel like it makes way more sense for that to be a Carrack. And maybe, you don't want to give somebody that nice of a ship because the Endeavor is so cheap. But at the same time, is it? Because if somebody has the, Olympic class or the Discovery class, or they have the Master set, think about spending $1,000 to get the Master set, and then all you get for it is a Starfarer and a Cutlass Red. No hate on the Starfarer, no hate on the Cutlass Red, but if you add up the cost of those ships, it doesn't even break the $600 or $700 mark. Actually, let's actually do that math. I don't know how much Starfarer is. Starfarer is $300, and let's see. The Cutlass Red is 135. So 135 plus 300, $435, and you spent $1,000 on the game. That's not even half of what you spent. So I mean, I think just give these folks a Carrack and a Cutlass Red. You know, I honestly, I'm not 100% sure why you give the Cutlass Red. I think maybe that's because you have the medical pods. You could just give a Cutlass Black. You know, um, but I'm open to a Cutlass Red. A Cutlass Red still fits, so But I think maybe give a Cutlass Red to people who bought the hospital set for the Endeavor. All right, the Expanse. You got to get rid of the Reliance. So I read this note here where it says temporarily loaning in Avenger Titan. I actually do have a Reliant. I'm not sure if that's by mistake or what, but I don't think the Reliant Core should be the ship for this anyway. I think this should be the newly released Cutter Rambler, at least for now. But that would make more sense, a Prospector and a Cutter Rambler. The Galaxy, another one that inspired me to make this list. Okay, so I think maybe because the Carrack is going to get some modularity, that's why they did the Carrack for the Galaxy. But here's why it bothers me. All right. So the Galaxy is it's going to be a refiner. It's going to have a medical capability, and it's going to have a base builder capability, right? The medical thing is covered by the Carrack. All of those things are covered by the Carrack, right? This one's great. So keep the Carrack for this, right? But let's go down and look at the actual large base builder, the Pioneer. It gets a Caterpillar and a Nomad. This is an $850 ship. The Galaxy is $380 and it gets a Carrack. The Pioneer is $850, more than twice the cost, and it gets a Caterpillar and a Nomad. Add a Carrack and make it what it should be. And then I think you should add a hover quad just to make up for the disrespect. You just have to at that point. But let's continue down the list, all right? The Hull B. So the Hull B right now gets the Hull A and the Arrow, and I'm going to say this for pretty much every ship that has the Arrow, because like I said, I think every ship on this list should just get an arrow for arena commander mode, and then they don't have to worry about this. I think you keep the whole A, but you trade the arrow for a raft. And then I think for the whole D, I think same thing. You replace the arrow with a raft. Keep these other two ships, the whole C and the Hercules C2, but then the arrow should be a raft. And the E, I do not think should be listed as the same as the D. It costs more, so it should get something extra. And I think all you have to do is, instead of giving the raft, like I said, give the raft for the D. Um, Instead give that the Raylan, that new alien ship, the Raylan, give that to the E owners. Instead of the raft, and I think that makes up for that disparity. Um, yeah, but I don't like when ships are lumped together like this, because they're not the same ship. One is more expensive than the other, right? Hurricane, that one's fine. We'll keep that one. I think the Idris M and P. Um, like I said, I don't like when you put ships together, but you could really, you know, the Idris isn't an Idris is an Idris, I guess you can say. But if you were gonna keep them the same, I think they should get both of the MPUVs. So they just get the passenger version. I would give them the passenger and the cargo. And like I said, I think all ships that are above, the $750 mark should get four ships. So that would be the Hammerhead, the Vanguard Harbinger, the MPUV passenger, and the cargo. Um, but honestly, I would replace the Vanguard Harbinger with an A2. This is an Idris, folks. It's an Idris. Either an M2 or an A2, I think, should replace the Harbinger. You wanted it to be able to do the bombing, so I would say a Hammerhead, an A2, and both of the MPUVs, and that would make this make a lot more sense. And for the Javelin, I mean, why does the Javelin, which costs significantly more than the Idris, get the same thing, basically? I would do the same thing here. Everything that the Idris gets, I think it should get. So this would be a Hammerhead. It would be an A2 and the MPUV passenger and the MPUV cargo. Except, even with the Javelin, I might go five ships or replace one of the MPUVs. But if you want to keep it to the four ship thing that I said, instead of getting the MPUV cargo or the MPUV passenger, or they just get a redeemer. You could pick whichever one for either the MPUV passenger or the MPUV cargo. So altogether, that would be a Hammerhead, an MPUV cargo or passenger. It would be an A2, and it would be a redeemer. That, I think, that would make most Javelin owners really happy to get that. Same thing with the Kraken. I think you got to replace that Buccaneer with the Cutlass Black for the regular one. And then for the Privateer, I think you got to replace that Buccaneer with the Constellation Taurus. Because that, to me, that just makes sense. But keep everything else, the Hammerhead, the Hercules C2, the Caterpillar. This I keep the same, so let's scroll down. I think the Mantis doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Why this should just be a Cutlass Blue. I think Cutlass Blue just makes sense for the Mantis here. We're talking interdiction, right? We're talking stopping people in their tracks. I think the Cutlass Blue just makes sense there, especially at the price point that it's at. So skip down to the Nautilus. So the Nautilus, I think I would replace that Avenger Titan with a Freelancer Miz. I know people love the Avenger Titan, but the Hammerhead makes sense. But I just feel like you need more than a Titan for what you get, right? So like the Nautilus is a mine layer, so nothing else has that functionality. But I just feel like an Avenger Titan just doesn't quite hit where it should. Whereas I feel like a Freelancer Miss would make a little bit more sense there. But that one's kind of up in the air. I mean, so enough people love the Avenger Titan to where I feel like you can keep that one the same, but I feel like a Freelancer Miss would make more sense to me. So let's drop down to the Odyssey. Okay. I'm not sure why the Reliant Core was kind of like, it seems like the Reliant Core was the go-to a lot here, when we talk about, loaner ships. And the Reliant series is not, it's not up to par yet. So, but when I look at the Odyssey, obviously the Carrack, that makes total sense, especially if we're saying this ship is more expensive than the Carrack, at least currently. That makes total sense. But these two, not so much. So for the Odyssey, I would just replace the core, the Reliant core, with a Freelancer Dur. That just makes sense to me. A Freelancer Dur, a Carrack, a Freelancer Dur, and an Avenger Titan. And you could even change the Titan out and, I would do a 315P instead of an Avenger Titan. All across the board, it would be all exploration ships. A Carrack, a Dur, and a 315P. That just makes sense. Or even you could do a 100i series, or one of the smaller exploration ships. But yeah, that I think that makes more sense than a core and a Titan. I already talked about the Orion. Add that constellation Taurus to this, and I think you'll make pretty much everybody happy. Or just any of the Connies really, but I think the Taurus just makes the most sense here. Perseus, this is pretty spot on, so we'll keep that. Pioneer, like I said, the Arastra and the Orion are pretty bad, but the Pioneer and the Galaxy, yeah, that needs a huge change. If you don't change anything else on the list, change those four, right? Change the Orion to get that Taurus, change the Pioneer to get a Carrack and a hover quad. I mean, if you don't change anything else, CIG, listen to me. If you don't change anything else, give the Pioneer owners a Carrack and a hover quad, right? And give the Orion owners a Constellation Taurus, all right? I think you should listen to my whole list, right? But if you can't, and you can only change a few for now, change those two. And I think that would make this list drastically better just by changing those two. The Polaris. Why do I get a Hammerhead and a Vanguard Harbinger and then another Hammerhead and a Vanguard Harbinger? Are you telling me that these two ships are the same? It doesn't make sense to me because the Polaris is significantly more expensive than the Perseus. That price point is significantly more expensive. So I would just replace the Harbinger with an M2 or a Redeemer. I think I personally would like the M2. A Hammerhead and an M2, I think, would make a really good combo for the Polaris. I think, those two would mesh well as far as loaners. But a Redeemer would be acceptable too, just to differentiate from the Perseus. Let's see what else we got. A lot of these were good. I think all the way until you get down to the Vulcan. And I think we're getting close to the end here. So the Vulcan, I would say keep the Starfarer, but I think you have to add a little bit more than just the Starfarer, because this is the rearm, refuel, repair. And since there's no small repair ship, honestly, I feel like you should give SRV, because since we can't repair, at the very least, we could drag people to somewhere where they can repair. And I think giving an SRV either on top of the Starfarer or even instead of the Starfarer would make a lot more sense. It just makes more sense, I think, because of what we want the Vulcan to do, right? And if you can't, then keep the Starfarer, and I think just add a Mule or a Cyclone or something like that. And I think that would make that one a lot better. Everything else, if I haven't mentioned it specifically, it's either in game already or we should keep. I think you should go through and check some of these that are already in game to see if are you keeping these on here for a reason? Are you giving them extra ships if like this is the only ship that they own? And you're just putting these in Arena Commander. You should explain a little bit more why these are the loaners as well. I think you could go in and say, well, we gave the 325A because this reason. We gave, the 85X because of this reason. We gave the Avenger Titan for this reason. I feel like if we don't need in-depth explanations, but like if you're not going to change it, or if you think that the choices you've made in most of these make sense and you're only going to change a few, then just, explain it a little bit, I think. And if you have already explained it, then link that here. You got some links here. I think you can add another one right here, and that would be perfect. My last thing is I think if the ship does not have its primary functionality in game yet, I think we should give a ship that has its primary functionality. We shouldn't replace a ship with another ship for a loaner that doesn't have all of its primary functionality. And I just think if we add that as a rule in here, I think we could also avoid some issues as well. But yeah, that's the loaner ship matrix. I really do hope that they update this in the beginning of next year especially with Squadron 42 becoming feature complete and all those folks moving back over. I think you have hopefully some more time for this. But yeah, I mean, we all want to play the game, and I understand maybe there's some balancing that you're doing here that I can't see on my end. I think you have a couple points here. You say here the concept of ship loaners was introduced to allow players who own a game package and a single ship to play the game when the ship was unavailable. The loaners for each ship are not intended to be a one-to-one best case substitute for the ship that isn't flight ready. But why? I mean, why? I mean, it makes a lot more sense to do the best case substitute, or at the very least make a better attempt at it. You know, I know you guys work hard over here. I'm not saying you guys didn't put any effort into this. Clearly you did. I just think it's so much easier, you know, to just go through and give people ships that are a little bit closer to what makes sense. And it might also open up a few people to buy those ships, right? Like, there's no way, if just to be like completely honest on my end, right? If the only ship I own in game is a Hull C, right? And the Hull C is not in game yet, and you give me an Arrow, I'm not gonna buy an Arrow if the only ship that I thought was interesting in the game was the Hull C, right? But if you give me, you know, a Hercules C2, right? I might be like, oh wow, like I really like this ship, and obviously I'm into cargo because the only ship I bought was a Hull C, and you're giving me a Hercules C2 as a loaner. I might be like, hey, maybe I want both of these. Maybe I want the Hull C for like my external cargo, and I want the Hercules C2 for my internal cargo. Like, I'm tired of people just ripping stuff off of my ship or whatever it is, right? So I think you open up more people, you know, open people up to, you know, potentially buying more in the game as well. So I think it serves a double purpose here. But yeah, I think the loanership matrix needs some love. So Proxus, if you're listening, I volunteer as tribute to personally come in and fix the loanership matrix. Proxus, if you're listening, help us. Give us an update for the loanership matrix, please. You don't have to take my advice. There's plenty of other people, I'm sure, that are on the internet that are giving advice for like what these loanerships could be. We are patient people. We are willing to wait for our ships. As long as they take, we want you to make them correctly, and we don't want you to skip anything. However, not saying do a complete overhaul. As I said, most of these are great. I just think there's a few that need some work. So that's it for this one. See you in the next one. Peace.